week on the 25th of August. So the framework was developed by the Interagency and Expert Group on Disaster-Related Statistics, and that was actually co-chaired by representatives from ESCAP. So I know we've got Ricky, who's our moderator today, who's been helping with that work, but also co-chairing was the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR Bonn office, and again we've got them joining us today, and the UK Health Security Agency, UKHSA. And this framework, which has been developed, is very much inspired by the disaster-related statistics framework, which was developed by ESCAP, and that was done a little while ago with support from the former expert group on disaster-related statistics in Asia and Pacific. And that regional work has really helped provide valuable lessons which have guided this global initiative. And let me also say at this point, a huge thanks to everyone who has been involved in the work, which has actually led up to this point. And disasters, whether they be natural, technological or biological, as we know, really have wide-reaching impacts on societies, economies and ecosystems. And yet despite this, the data that we actually need to prepare for these, to respond, but also to recover from these events, is often fragmented, inconsistent or locked up within specific sectors, or often just completely missing. Official statistics can really play a critical role then in addressing these gaps by helping to provide credible, harmonised and comparable information, which really helps us to be able to assess impacts, identify vulnerable groups and high-risk areas, and coordinate information from multiple sources and link disaster data with socioeconomic statistics to give a much more complete picture for policy and planning purposes. So this framework really aims to offer countries a standardised and coherent structure for compiling disaster-related statistics, and that will help to support stronger disaster risk management, but also post-disaster assessment and the monitoring of global commitments such as the Sendai framework and the SDGs. So today's Stats Cafe will outline this new framework development and the scope of it, and then explain how all of you can actively contribute when the global consultation begins fully next week on the 25th of August. So your insights will be really essential to helping ensure that the framework is robust, that it's inclusive and truly responsive to national needs. So really thank you to everyone for joining us today on this important milestone, and we look forward to your contributions as we work together to strengthen disaster-related statistics worldwide. So at this point, I have the pleasure to hand over to our moderator for today, who is Ricky Munk-Hansen, who is the Chief of Economic and Environment Statistics Section in Statistics Division at ESCAP, but also, as I said, the co-chair of the G-DRSF. There's an awful lot of these acronyms today, so I might just try and pass over at this point so I don't get any of them wrong anymore. So over to you, Ricky. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and a warm welcome also from me to today's Stats Cafe. As Rachel rightly mentioned, the purpose of today's consultation really is to make sure everyone in Asia and the Pacific have the chance to be aware of the upcoming global consultation of a new statistical framework on disaster-related statistics, and also hopefully motivate you all to be actively engaged in that upcoming consultation. We will, during the course of this hour, have first an overview of what has come before and what comes next in terms of developing and finalizing this global disaster-related statistics framework. And we will then spend some time with having a panel with 3 very experienced panelists who can give some insights and experiences also from past global consultations to really make it very clear to the whole audience today what are the opportunities and why statistical frameworks as a standard go through global consultations before being approved and adopted globally. So that is really the purpose and list of activities during this meeting. And our first presenter today is Mr. Suan Che from UNDRR. As Rachel mentioned, the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction is very heavily involved in developing this statistical framework. UNDRR's Bonn office is the secretariat for the interagency and expert group on disaster-related statistics. And our speaker today, Suan Che, one can actually say that he very much constitutes the secretariat for this interagency and expert group. Welcome to you, Suan. In addition to supporting our work to developing the global disaster-related statistics framework, Suan also manages data and analysis for the Sendai framework monitoring, and Suan has also earlier worked with official statistics for quite a number of years, both with the UN Statistics Division of DESA in New York, as well as with the Economic Commission of Africa. So that was a little background on you, and I will hand over to you, Suan, now. The floor is yours for the next 7 minutes or so to take us through the global process and how we got to where we are today. Please.
Thank you very much, Rike, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. I would like to take the next few minutes to quickly go through the progress that has been made on creating the upcoming new global disaster-related statistical framework, or in acronym, we call it G-DRSF now. On the background of what we have done so far from the IAE G-DRS and what we're planning to launch during the global consultation. So we all know that disaster has been increasing in both of its intensity and the effect it has imposed on every country in the world, as well as on its frequency. We have seen much more frequent and more intensive disasters, which require the improvement and enhancement of disaster-related statistics, because we cannot manage, we cannot measure, and if we don't have adequate, sufficient, and real-time disaster statistics, then it is impossible to understand the risk and the impact of the disaster, as well as how to respond and build that better. However, despite all the national efforts from across the world, there has been some persistent challenges in generating and using disaster statistics. Some of the key challenges include data gaps and inconsistency in quality of the data, which hinders the full potential and the use of having a national database and covering everybody under these disaster data. The desegregation is a big challenge, as countries have repeatedly mentioned that the limited or insufficient desegregation really limits their capability of understanding the disaster impact in the local setting and to produce the most relevant and most targeted policies. A lot of the countries also have fragmented system to produce this data. And finally, as always, the capacity and resource impose a huge limit. Given these challenges, there's also recognition of a lot of needs and potential benefit that a better disaster statistic framework can bring to the country, including if we have standardization in classification and in creation of statistics, then time series analysis and time comparison of the disaster could be possible. as well as international monitoring and regional aggregation could be improved. The consistency in monitoring will allow the country to better and more quickly respond to the disasters. With an integrated system, you can improve the quality and the completeness, and also the capacity and the guidance is also much needed from the countries. The disaster statistics is not only matters to disaster alone, it is one of the crucial element or a keystone in the whole system of official statistics and international development agendas. The creation of disaster-related statistics involve usually the national statistic offices, the NSOs, as well as other entities and experts, including the National Disaster Management Agencies, NDMAs. And the use of the disaster-related statistic can apply to local risk assessment, national risk assessment, to the intense events post-disaster need assessment, to the civil protection and disaster response initiatives, and of course, to international frameworks such as the Sustainable Development Goals, the Sendai Framework, and the Paris Agreement on climate change. Given the importance of the disaster-related statistics, the UN has working for the last almost 8 years on creating a better framework for managing and monitoring disaster statistics. This approach or this push started in 2017 when the General Assembly endorsed the open-ended interagency expert group, working group on developing the statistics. Ever since the OIEWG has evolved into the interagency expert group, the IAEG, that we are currently having, with ESCAP being one of the co-chairs alongside with UNDRR and UKHSA. So the IAEG has been reporting to the UN Statistical Commission on the progress made, which obviously is the highest governing body for the statistical systems in the world. And the IAEG has been involved in a series of global forums annually to receive more expert input to further refine the structure of the framework. And finally, starting from December last year, the drafting progress has started for the G-DRSF, so that the hope is to have the first ever global framework on disaster-related statistics ready to be communicated to the global community in both disaster management agency as well as NSAs. So that is why we're planning to have the global consultation starting next week. And finally, with all this effort and the receiving from the comment received from the global consultation, the plan is to incorporate the comments, refine the framework, and submit it again to the March 2026 version of the Statistical Commission for the Commission to consider the G-DRSF. Currently, the framework in its drafting phase consists of 6 separate chapters, each cover a different important topics of disaster-related statistics. Chapter 1 or 2 mostly setting the scene of the framework background with introductions, the concepts, the key concepts, including the definitions, the scope, and the conceptual framework of disaster-related statistics. Chapter 3 will focus on the type of disaster-related statistics, as well as the different settings, both in terms of national and international settings for creating disaster statistics, and the roles and responsibilities strengths and challenges for NSOs and DMAs and different entities producing them. Chapter 4 focus on the exposure, vulnerability, and coping capacity, or in some other terms, we call them the non-event specific statistics, which are the statistics that determine the disaster risks as well as the response of the disasters. Chapter 5 will focus on the event-specific statistic, which include two main parts. One is the occurrence of disaster statistics. The second part are the impacts, different type and different how to assess the different impacts of disaster. And finally, Chapter 6 covers the this disaster expenditure accountings with different accounts of different activities of disaster. As Rike and Rachel mentioned before, the global consultation is scheduled to kick off later this month from 25th of August. And it was planned to be a run for about 5 weeks time and to be closed by 30th of September. So the whole month of September, the framework will be open for global consultation. We're working to have a coordinated approach to communicate and disseminate the framework and its chapters to all the NSOs, the National Disaster Management Agency, as well as other relevant national and international organizations and agencies. The main feedback we want to receive are two types. Since this framework, it's the first iteration of hopefully of many development of disaster-related statistics. We understand as the first framework, we want to get the general feedback from the agencies and countries about the key components of the inclusion. Basically, are we including all the important elements of disaster-related statistics? Are we missing anything crucial? And is there anything that we're not getting it right? So we really want to make sure that the framework set the tone and the background for future development. And to make sure that happens, we want to make sure that the coverage and the scene setting of the framework is correct. And that is the first kind of feedback we want to receive. The second kind of feedback are special technical comments and methodology guidelines and suggestions on the different type of statistics, including exposure, vulnerability, coping capacity, occurrences, as well as DR expenditure accountings. And so for both of these type of feedbacks, we're really looking forward to the input from member state as well as from international organizations. We plan to launch the global consultation from multiple fronts, from ESCAP, UNDRR, UN Statistic Division, and of course other regional commissions will coordinate together to disseminate the global consultation as broadly as possible. And also, we encourage and recommend the consultation to be conducted in a coordinated manner within the country. By this, it means that we welcome the NSOs, NDMAs, and other agencies to consult each other and produce a coordinated response rather than just a standalone response from individual organizations. And in this way, we believe that the global consultation can receive the maximum coverage, as well as the covers the variety of expertise from different domains and expert groups. So thank you. I hope this gave a little intro on the work has currently been done and the upcoming few weeks expectation. And of course, I'll be happy to answer a question from the audience at the appropriate time. And now I turn the floor back to Rike. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Suan, for that very clear overview. If anyone has a quick question now to Suan, it's time to raise your electronic hand. I do not see any hands right now, and I also don't see any comments in the chat. But if any of you think of questions during the course of the next 30-40 minutes, then I'm very, very happy to pick them up when we do get to the question and answer session a little bit later during the course of this hour. So please type away in the chat box, and Suan will also stay online until we close the cafe. So we can pick those up if you put them in the chat. So for now, Suan, I will say thank you very much. And we will then initiate the panel discussion of this cafe. We thought it would be a good opportunity to hear from some people with experiences in developing frameworks, in editing frameworks, in consulting, etc. So we have put up a very strong panel here of 3 beautiful people. If you could put your cameras on, both Hakan, Michael, and Carl. Excellent. You are looking great. Because then I would introduce all of you in one go, and then we can get into the questions that I'll be asking to each one of you afterwards. So our 3 panelists today is first Hakan Yazicioglu. Hakan is the head of data dissemination and communication department at the Turkish Statistical Institute, Turkstat. Hakan has long experience in official statistics. He's been working on SDG statistics, environment statistics, environmental accounting, and much, much more. And until very recently, Hakan was working here at ESCAP in Bangkok. So it's great to see you again, Hakan. And Hakan was very much focusing his work at ESCAP on the development of the draft statistical framework. So Hakan can take much credit for where we are at right now on the framework. So it's really good to see you, Hakan, and thank you for joining us on the panel today. Hakan's main inputs to the panel here is that we are picking his brain a bit on the national perspective of developing global statistical framework. Secondly, we have Carl Obst, the director of the IDEA Group consultancy. And I think to many of the people tuning in to the Stats Cafe today, Carl, you are more known as the grand old man of SIA. Carl was the main author of the system of environmental economic accounts, and you've also been involved since then in the technical editing of many related frameworks and guidance, including the ecosystem accounting. Much earlier, you worked at the Australian Bureau of Statistics, where Carl was heading the National Accounts Department for a number of years. And more hitting home in terms of the topic of today, Carl has also had the opportunity to read and comment on the current version of the Global Disaster-Related Statistics Framework. So maybe we can get some early insights also there from you, Carl. So thank you very much for joining the panel today. Last but not least, we have Michael Nagy. On the panel, Michael works in the Economic Commission for Europe in the statistics division there, and Michael is a long-standing colleague and friend of myself and at statistics at ESCAP in more broad terms. It's always lovely to see you, Michael. At the Economic Commission for Europe, Michael is responsible for a number of activities related to environment statistics, environmental accounts, as well, of course, as disaster-related statistics. Earlier on, Michael has worked in the Qatar Statistics Authority and also been at the Austrian Environment Agency. Specifically to today, Michael is a very active member, core member of the Interagency and Expert Group on Disaster-Related Statistics, and not least as the main initiator of our annual expert forums for users and producers of disaster-related statistics, where we can always count on Michael to do what he wants to and what we tell him to do as well. So thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today, where we'll get a bit of perspective there from the United Nations in terms of developing statistical frameworks. So let us get into the questions. It's such that we have prepared 2 questions for each of our panelists. So I will go through those just in one round. So what I will do is to ask each of our panelists to spend, let's say, 5 or 7 minutes to respond or reflect on both questions that we are putting on the screen. So first to Hakan and Turkey. Hakan, 2 questions for you here. From a national perspective, what do you believe are the key benefits of adopting standardized statistical frameworks, and how can they enhance policy making and, in this case, disaster risk management? The second question, why is it so important for countries to actively participate in global consultations, and what value can regional collaboration bring to the development of international standards? So with that, Hakan, I will look forward to your reflections on those 2 questions, please.
Thank you so much, Rike. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, very clear.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. First of all, it's a good.
Okay, I think we lost Hakan. Yeah. Hakan, can you hear me? No, we lost the connection. Can I just ask my colleague? Oh. Hakan, we cannot hear you. Okay, while we try to get the connection back to Hakan, I suggest that we move to our second panelist and then we revert to Hakan afterwards. So if we could move to the next slide, Paul, and then we can ask, yes, thank you very much. So 2 questions. Carl, you can hear me okay? Excellent, and I can see you moving, so there's a hole through there. So, Carl, 2 questions for you. So, as an editor of the system of environmental economic accounting, if you could share your experience from then on how feedback from countries through these global consultations processes help shape the frameworks and also facilitate their adoption and use afterwards. And secondly, as you have seen the draft Global Disaster-Related Statistics Framework, what do you think about the contents as they are right now, and what aspects of feedback from countries could be particularly helpful given what you've seen? So the floor is yours, Carl.
Thank you very much, Rike. Hello, everyone. I should say thank you very much for the kind introduction, although I wasn't so sure I wanted to be called an old man yet. Very nice to have this opportunity, and I'm happy to try and share a couple of experiences. So I've been working on the international manuals space now for 15 years ago. I started work on the SIA, and that seems to just continue on. I think in actual fact, it's been a great experience. It's something I've really enjoyed over the years. And one of the reasons for that is that you start to have the engagement with countries and finding out that in actual fact the same set of standards doesn't really work in exactly the same way everywhere. So the way in which you were able to bring in the some alternative perspectives, it may sometimes be that the concepts stay the same, but the way you phrase it, the additional details that are added in, trying to take advantage of the experiences from a lot of different countries. And there's absolutely no doubt that that whole process of getting countries engaged is really, fundamental in making sure that the documents that are working through these types of processes, CEO being one, the SNA being another that I'm very familiar with, and in this case, the disaster-related statistics framework, benefits from global consultation. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is it's one of the opportunities, not the only one, but it's one opportunity for a formal process of engagement with statistical officers that goes beyond the technical engagement level. So often with these sort of formal processes, there'll be invitations that will go to the head of the statistical office. Someone will find out about the fact that there's a process that needs to be responded to. So it brings a broader awareness. It's also often an opportunity, perhaps linking to the question that Hakan will speak to shortly, about linking with policy agencies. Sometimes statistical agencies have a challenge in linking to policy places, but these types of processes open the door to that sort of discussion, which is awesome. One of the things you also find is that it's often statistical framework documents are not ones that people read very often. And so these sorts of processes sometimes end up meaning that people read the documents for the first time, or they read the whole document a little bit more cover to cover, which is, I generally say that that's not the way these things are normally used. Not many people read documents cover to cover of this nature, but when you go through these processes, you start to find out more about that. So I think that can help broaden the understanding of the concepts and start to build what effectively I think is the most important thing about these standards is a common language. So getting agreement on terms and those types of things. So the process itself actually reveals that different people interpret the same word differently. And indeed, if I sort of linking to the second question, one of the interesting ones seems to be that the term stocks, for example, is interpreted quite differently by disaster experts compared to how it would be understood by a national accountant. And each sort of different measurement discipline has its own use of terms, and these types of, particularly in this instance where you've got a bit more of perhaps a cross disciplinary process, you start to find out that different words, you need to be careful on the language, and so you need to think about that. So that opportunity to be able to create language and explaining the differences between different people is fantastic. So then to maybe finish off on the second question, it's been great. I've only been looking at the document over the last 3 or 4 weeks, working, which has been great. I think overall it's coming together very nicely, building on obviously discussions from experts over last little while. I think in terms of feedback from countries, I don't think my experience would suggest don't close the door to anything. If you're the type of person who likes to review things and worry about the language, we can say as much as possible from our side, no, we're going to get it edited at the end, but sometimes picking up small things can be helpful. So if you're a person who looks for detail, feel free to send that in. But I think more generally, we're looking for issues of consistency. Can you think about the way in which it might work across different statistics? In this case, there's links to population statistics, to national accounts, to other data. Are these things helpful for you? Is the way they're described helpful or confusing in terms of linking to those other statistical domains? And coherence across the chapters. Have we said similar but different things in different parts of the chapters? That's certainly a check that will need to be done anyway, but through the global consultation you get more eyes onto the document and it starts to open up things. So I think, and maybe I'll link back to the last one. Sometimes what I have found is that whenever you get a group of people reading a chapter or a document, everyone will comment generally on different parts. It's remarkable how much people will pick things up. Even errors will not everyone will spot them. Some people will, some people won't. But what you do find is if you've got a particular problem with about, say, 2 or 3 paragraphs and you find that there's 5 or 10 countries that have all said something about it, then you go, all right, we better look at that one because there's some issues that are out there. So I think it's just a great experience to work through, and it's one that I've enjoyed over the last 15 years. So look forward to all of you. Hopefully you'll have the chance to have some input into it and benefit from the process as well. Thanks, Ricky.
Thanks a lot, Carl, and maybe we should just call you a grandman going forward, and I'll skip the old part. So what I'm taking away here is that definitely the global consultation is a benefit looking from the national perspective in terms of having that opportunity for a conversation also with more policy-oriented parts of a government, which often for statistical officers can be a little bit difficult to get them to actually read and engage. But I'm also hearing on the other side that what you are seeing is that receiving the input from the global consultations are very, very useful for the people who are sitting trying to actually finalize a new global framework or guidance. So it is really a win-win from all dimensions, but also underpinning everything that a global consultation is an opportunity to just have so many more eyes on things that everyone basically gains. So thanks a lot, Carl. Very good points and advice from you there. So let's move back to Hakan. I'm just going to check, Hakan. Can you try to say something?
Yes, can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes,
okay.
And I see
Sorry
you and you're moving and everything. So I suggest, since we have the questions on the screen, I'm not going to read them again. I'll simply hand it over directly to you for your reflections. So please do go ahead, Hakan.
Thank you again, Rikes, and sorry for the connection lost. Actually, from the country's point of view, I think the real value of a standardized statistical framework for disaster-related data is that it helps us move from inconsistent numbers to a single reliable evidence base for decision making. Actually, right now, in many countries, disaster data sits with different institutions, national disaster management agencies, meteorological and hydrological agencies, ministries, municipalities, each using their own methods and criteria to collect data or produce these statistics. One may count an event as a disaster and another may not. And this kind of things creates confusion. And without a common framework, we cannot even answer a basic question like how many disasters did we actually face last year? And also a global framework like the DRSF gives us the common language. It tells us what counts a disaster, how to record it, and what core information we need. For example, should a severe drought be recorded as one event or multiple years? Or when exactly does it begin or end? These questions matter because otherwise the numbers will not be comparable across time or across countries. And without comparability, we cannot see the real trends. And standardization also helps strengthen the institutional coordination. It brings the nation statistical offices, disaster agencies, and all other data holders into a coherent data ecosystem. So this integration not only improves the quality and completeness of disaster data, but also ensures that they are embedded into broader national statistical and development frameworks. And additionally, adoption of a standardized DRSF improves the timeliness, accuracy, and usability of data during the full disaster management cycle. And it also supports the long-term resilience building. And of course, it's not only about the national needs. With standardized disaster data and statistics, these same statistics can feed directly into our reporting for the Sendai framework, SDGs, the Paris Agreement, and this reduces the reporting burden and ensures our national strategies are aligned with the global commitments. To put it simply, adopting the standardized DRSF actually means for me we are all working from the same playbook. It brings our definitions, classifications, and data collection in line with transparent, internationally agreed methods. That way, actually, we can trust the facts we are using. They are consistent, comparable, and reliable. And with that kind of foundation, I think we can make smarter policies and manage disaster risks more effectively. If I continue with the second question, why is it crucial for countries to actively participate in the global commitments and disaster statistics, and what value can regional collaboration bring to the development of international standards? I think the key point here is simple, and if countries don't participate in global consultations on disaster statistics, the global standards will still be written. But they may not reflect what countries actually need or can realistically implement. And then we risk ending up with a framework that looks very good on a paper, but does not work in practice. When countries actively engage, even through with written feedback, they help ensure that global DRSF reflects real conditions on the ground. For example, countries face very different types of disasters. Think of cyclones in the Pacific, earthquakes in Japan, floods in Italy, locust infestation in Africa, or sandstorms in Arab region and wildfires in Australia. These differences actually affect what kind of data is important and how it is collected. And what is even possible to produce. Even the way a country defines or records a disaster can vary. Some might include small-scale localized events, others only count major disasters that trigger formal emergency declarations. So when countries provide feedback, they are not just reviewing a document, they are making sure the framework includes their perspective and becomes something they can actually use. It's about turning a technical tool into something that is practical, grounded, and adaptable. Actually, we have already seen how valuable this kind of feedback is. Here, I want to give a few minutes if I have enough time, which I was also involved in the technical working group on disaster-related statistics in Asia and Pacific, as you know, led by ESCAP, worked closely with the Asia-Pacific countries to test the practicality of the DRSF tables. And through this collaboration, they identified which tables and statistics were straightforward to produce and which ones were more challenging. That process actually revealed important lessons, and those lessons directly helping to improve the global framework right now. And similarly, UNEC Task Force on Measuring Hazardous Events and Disasters, which has been active since 2015 in the CES region, also provided valuable information to the development of the global DRSF. And maybe Michael will mention it about later, so I will not go into detail. And also another good example is the Global Expert Forums for the producers and users of disaster-related statistics that provided a platform for the countries to share their experiences. And this also provided insights for building a more inclusive and usable global framework. At the end of the day, disasters don't respect borders, and neither should our data. But every country is different in terms of risk, capacity, and systems. That's why it's so important to have the broad participation in this global consultation. Actually, the global DRSF will only be as strong and useful as the range of experiences and voices that shape it. So country participation and inputs is not just a formality here, it's an essential step in making sure that when the next disaster strikes, the tools we have to assess, respond, and rebuild are actually fit for purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hakan, for those excellent points. I mean, the main takeaway message I'm hearing here is that the country consultation is the process and activity that ensures that a global framework is useful. That's really what I'm hearing. And you're also echoing some messages that we heard maybe with a few different words already also from Carl. I mean, stressing that anyone planning to contribute to the global consultation should not hold themselves back at all in terms of comments, because it can only get stronger through those. So thank you so much for those very important points, Hakan. I will move on then. You did a very nice bridging actually to our next panelist here. So let's move on to Michael and to UNECE. Here, of course, speaking because you have a lot of experience, Michael, in developing and having and supporting also various expert groups that are into developing guidance or other types of frameworks. So the questions to you, Michael, is from the perspective of the United Nations, what are the benefits for countries to engage in the development of global statistical frameworks? And from your experience with developing statistical frameworks at regional and global levels, why are consultations such as the one planned for the G-DRSF critical for the framework's development and adoption? And if you could provide a few examples from the ECE region, that would be excellent. So please, Michael, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rick, and thank you very much to the organizers for this kind invitation. It's a good way to start the week. For me, it's only Monday morning, but I think this is really exciting before I then turn back to actually drafting a technical document later this week. Yeah, coming back to these questions, it seems like my speaking notes have been leaked to Carl and to Hakan, because many things have already been said, which I think is not bad. I'm just trying to maybe say a few additional things from a different perspective, from the UN perspective and from my own experience. So regarding the first question, I made I think there are three important points from this point of view. One is to ensure a useful shared language and comparability while acknowledging national differences at the same time. I think this is something that Hakan also has been mentioned. But then maybe an additional point that I would like to mention is ownership. And another point that was also discussed by Carl was establishing partnerships and having learning opportunities. So I think that's also a thing that we should not forget. To read from cover to cover, I think this is maybe really the only moment in time where people are doing this. But let me say a few words about the ensuring a useful shared language and comparability. So we expect from a global framework that it kind of standardizes the terms, the definitions that we are using, but at the same time, we need to understand that there are national differences and national contexts. And this is specifically important when we talk about disaster-related statistics, because disasters don't respect borders, as we know. So we have to ensure that the national context is reflected, and the consultation actually is a means to get this information, to see if anything has been overlooked that should be considered. I'll just give you one simple example that might strike you immediately. We know that very often the same phenomenon can have different names from the local context. Things like a hurricane, a typhoon, a tropical cyclone. It's actually the same or a similar phenomenon, but it's named differently in different countries. And I'm not talking here about indigenous names that might be used on a very sub-national context. So it might be very important to have this considered in a global framework. But also very important is that new ideas can emerge from the consultation, things that have not been seen by the group that was drafting the document. I see this with every consultation in countries, that something new may pop up that has been overlooked. And so I would say if countries do not engage, their perspectives and terminology may be missing, and the resulting framework may be seen as not fit for purpose by them. So, and this would be really a missed opportunity. This leads me also to talking a few words about ownership. So the guidelines and frameworks that we are developing as a UN Secretariat in collaboration with countries, they should be useful for the countries. The main target group is national experts. It should nothing that is be imposed on countries because some person in the UN thought, oh, that might be a good idea to collect this information. No, it's your document. It's not the UN. It's not the document of the UN. So the UN provides the platform and the secretariat to make it simply happen that such a document is being produced and at the end of the day, hopefully be adopted and become a global guidelines. But the process should always be country driven, and there are many means to engage. So the engagement ensures that the framework reflects national realities, capacities, and also priorities. And last but not least, in response to the first question, I think a lot have been said already by Carl. So it's an opportunity to establish partnerships within the country, but also within expert communities. So when I take the disaster-related statistics framework as an example, we know we need buy-in from people who work on climate change, for example, climate change statistics, climate change policies. At the same time, we see that the system of environmental economic accounting provides a very important conceptual foundation for this work. People who work on climate change statistics might not see this link because they're very often different people than those who work on the SEA. And our role as the UN is very often simply to encourage this collaboration because we see the links. We are not kind of biasing this work, but we see the links and we bring the communities together. So it's important to use this opportunity in the consultation process. So by engaging in shaping the framework, countries don't just receive a United Nations product. They contribute to the development of a tool that is really useful for them. So this is, in a nutshell, what I wanted to respond on the first question. And I think there's lots of repetition also to what Hakan and Carl have already said. And this is not bad that we are on the same page here. Concerning a bit practical experiences, I'm deviating now a bit from the disaster work, just making reference to similar work. And I think similar to the work process at other regional commissions and ESCAP, when we develop this kind of technical documents, consultations are part of every step of the work. So it's not the UN who drives the process, as I said, it's the countries driving the process. So in our case, it starts usually by identifying a new topic that might be relevant for National Statistical Office or National Statistical Systems, things like measuring circular economy, for example, or things like disaster-related statistics, which were new topics for statistical offices a couple of years ago. So somebody brings this topic up as a chief statistician in our main body, the Conference of European Statisticians. So if they decide this could be a relevant topic, then usually it's decided to make an in-depth review. So this means a small group of countries, it should be country-led. A country is drafting a kind of issue paper saying, okay, circular economy or disaster-related statistics is very important for national statistical systems because of this or that reason. And then also brings together what do countries already work in this area, what is already done by international organizations, and what are the major issues that we have to figure out and have to deal with before we can talk about measuring or contributing to measuring this issue. So this is another buy-in. Countries already working on this in-depth review. If the Bureau of the Conference of European Statisticians thinks, yes, these are really issues that we need to work on, a task force is established or a technical expert group. It has different names in different regions. We call it task force. Again, that should be chaired by a country. It's a country-driven process, and this task force is actually working on the issues or trying to resolve the issues. So at the end of the day, we might have a guideline document, or we might even have a framework driven by a country process drafted by a task force. International organizations usually participate in these task forces, but it should be led by a country. We are just providing the secretariat at EC. Then we have the product. And then we're at the stage that was described by Rike and by Juan. We have a draft document, then goes to consultation process. We get the feedback, we make some modifications, hopefully only minor modifications, and then it goes for adoption. But with this, we ensure that a small group of experts who had the resources, the knowledge, the capacity to draft something in a very proactive manner, this is already country buy-in, but secondly, everybody, even countries who didn't have the resources to contribute to the drafting the document or didn't have the experience, have a say on the document. So this is the general way we work. And I know my time is running out, but let me give you 2 or 3 examples where it was very important to get feedback from countries. The first example is we drafted a Conference of European Statisticians Waste Statistics Framework. Many of you might not know, but there is still no global waste statistics framework, even if waste is something of global relevance. There's lots of work done by OECD, by Eurostat. Of course, we have SDG indicators, but there is no framework at all right now that really defines, for example, what is waste from a global perspective. It starts with things like that. Anyways, so there was a call from our chief statistician saying we need to clarify this for our region for many, many reasons. There is a lack of a framework. So we drafted as a task force such a waste statistics framework for our region. And then in the consultation process—
1 minute, Michael.
1 minute, yes.
minute.
I give you one example from that framework that also is maybe relevant for the Asia Pacific region. For example, whether or not to include informal waste collection. From a European perspective, informal waste picking is maybe not such a big deal, so it might not be considered in waste statistics. From an outside of Europe perspective, this is something absolutely relevant. So if you don't consider that, if you don't have the feedback from countries that is something relevant, you might lead to incomparable figures, even when you talk about something similar like recycling rates. I think I leave it at that, just with this example by running out of time. But in a nutshell, I would like to say that these consultations really matter because it turns a draft into a suitable framework, as Hakan also said, and they transform the work of a few experts into a product owned by all countries. So the ownership is back in this phrase. And this is the only way a global framework can succeed and will be adopted at the end of the day. I stop here. I know I'm running out of time. Over to you, Rike.
Thank you very much, Michael. You're just running a minute over time, so don't worry, but we are running out of time for the overall Café, in spite of all our efforts here to plan. I am going to quickly see, well, we don't have any questions in the chat, but I see that there's one hand raised, so I'll just invite. This is a hand from Naira. Naira, please ask your question.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, Naira.
Great to see you, all of you. I have just one quick question related to the response from countries. Do you think that, for example, statistical agencies or statistical committee are the best agencies that will summarize and send the recommendations or comments from the country? Or maybe more professional, for example, DRR related professional companies must summarize these comments. What do you think?
Thank you very much for that question, Naira. Since I'm the moderator today, I'm not going to attempt to respond, but I may add a little bit after someone else picks this question up, and I think it is really directed to our secretariat of the IAT. So I'll hand it over to you, Suwan, the question from Naira, please.
Yes, thank you, Naira, for this question. A quick answer, I think yes. I think it will be very good to have the National Statistics Office to coordinate the response, because at the end of the day, this is a statistical framework, right? The DRSF is, the name is in there. So, but we're also not imposing any limitation on what is the structure or the governance mechanism should be. So we'll leave it up to each one of you to decide, but I think personally it's a great approach for NSOs to take the to organizing initiative. I don't know if any other colleague want to chime in on this, but that'll be my quick answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suan. The only thing I will do is to thank Naira for the question and say that I agree with your answer, because we don't have time for elaboration. But thanks, Naira, very, very much for that question. It's very pertinent to the global consultation. It actually leaves us fully out of time. It's past the hour here, but hopefully all of you who have listened in will know also how to ask questions if you have any. You're always welcome to contact me or any of my colleagues at ESCAP, and we will direct questions onwards if we can't respond to them ourselves. What I want to do is to quickly just summarize 3 points from what we've heard today. And indeed, as Michael, you rightly mentioned, there's been a lot of coherence among our 3 panelists. It's very good. I think we all benefit from getting the same messages more than once. One should not overestimate, one's ability to remember. So repetition is not a bad thing at all. But what I'm really hearing is that the advantages from these global consultations are mutual, both from the point of view of developers of frameworks as well as the eventual users of frameworks. The global consultations, they ensure that we all have the same language around a development phenomena, that there is shared ownership of the global frameworks, and also that there is practical usefulness of the frameworks seen particularly from the national and country perspective. So I think those are the 3 key points to take away from the discussion today. I will also mention that today has been very much a process-focused Stats Café. We will be organizing a more technical webinar where we have the chance to get a little bit more into the contents of this global framework. This will be organized most likely in late September. We'll issue more information about this shortly. So there should be an opportunity to dive a little bit into the technicalities. I want to give my colleague Piyapat Nakonchai a big thank you, because she's the one who's been organizing and pulling together the Stats Café today, as well as my colleague Anne, who's been supporting us during this hour in particular. And then, of course, our presenters and panelists who are on the screen today. Thank you all for sharing your reflections and insights, and thank you very much to our audience as well. So with that, I will close the Stats Café. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.